King's Manor is a historic building that is now part of the University of York campus, but if you walk around the back of the building, you can find a little hidden feature that experts say leaves clues to a remarkable future discovery. You see, nearly 2,000 years ago, the city we know as York was founded as Eboracum, when 6,000 members of the Roman 9th Legion marched north from Lincoln and stationed themselves here. Eboracum doubled as a Roman town and a legionary fortress, and it was the second largest population centre in Britain, or Roman Britannia, after Londinium, which is obviously London. There were actually 3 main legionary fortresses in Roman Britannia, obviously the one here in York, one in what is now Caerleon in Wales, and the other was at present-day Chester, founded around the same time as Eboracum, whilst the Romans moved north into Brigantes tribal lands. So how does this relate to the topic of today's video at King's Manor? Well, both of these other legionary cities had large military amphitheatres. In fact, the one at Chester is the largest we've ever found in Britain. Amphitheatres are the large elliptical arenas that were used for the viewing of entertainment, often brutal sporting events. But no amphitheatre has ever been found in York. The chances that one wasn't built here is almost zero. Stuart Ainsworth from the Channel 4's Time team, I'll be talking about him quite often, who himself is a leading archaeologist, spoke about the matter. He stated, "Its massive legionary presence. It should have an amphitheatre. It will have one. It just hasn't been found, in my opinion." To add to this, earlier this year in 2025, the first ever physical evidence for human-animal gladiatorial combat was discovered in the city of York, on a quiet street called Driffield Terrace. The other skeletons in this Roman cemetery in question tell us the men had come from all corners of the Roman Empire. They were all well built and they bore signs of horrific violence. So it is almost certain that there is a military amphitheatre somewhere beneath the city, which brings us to King's Manor. With the current building dating back as far as 1483, there's a very important map here that you need to understand for the rest of the video. So this whole area was once the precinct of St Mary's Abbey, once the richest abbey in the north of England before Henry VIII destroyed them all. This abbey surrendered 50 monks and £1.7 million in today's money. The building in this video, King's Manor, is interesting enough to make an hour-long documentary on, but save that for another time. It started out as the abbot's house for the abbey, and the last thing you need to know is that this area is now known as Museum Gardens, which opened in 1830 with the Yorkshire Museum, one of the first purpose-built museums in the whole of Britain. But we are more interested in what lay beneath the gardens. So going back to King's Manor, somewhat hiding around the side of the building, you can see an architectural oddity. Parts of the building appear to be leaning towards each other, not too dissimilar to the Tower of Pisa. It appears tilted. Stuart Ainsworth says the lean suggests there's a hollow underground, which is one indicator that there may be an amphitheatre beneath. See, this exact same phenomenon of the leaning buildings occurred in Chester before the amphitheatre was accidentally discovered there in 1929, when a new boiler was being added to the cellar. But there are 3 other potential clues to break down, and also we can ask, why haven't we found it yet? Firstly, one thing the Romans were great at was displaying visual signs of their dominance and power. Take Hadrian's Wall, for example. Yes, it absolutely served a purpose as the northern frontier of the Roman Empire, but it was also a symbol, a sign to the Britons south of the wall. This is what we can do, and this is the power that we yield over you. And here we have another case. Amphitheatres were not just used for violent entertainment. They were also a symbol. They were often placed near rivers and visible from the main city entrances as a sign of imperial power, importance, and strength. So this is another sign that the amphitheatre may have been placed here underneath King's Manor, as this location is very close to the banks of the River Ouse and would also be visible from the main entrance into the city from the south. But if we go to 2010, a skeleton was found just 30 centimetres beneath the foundations of the Yorkshire Museum. As part of a refit for the Yorkshire Museum in January 2010, workers stumbled across a skeleton. it was no ordinary skeleton. York osteoarchaeology revealed the man was a Roman. He perished between the ages of 36 and 45. He was of a muscular build with well-developed arms and of great height for Roman times. His life was ended by 6 powerful sword blows, one to the back of the head. So this was certainly a gladiator. But why was he found here instead of the numerous cemeteries around York? Well, experts believe he may have been a disgraced gladiator who was simply thrown away with the rubbish and left to rot. A gruesome tale, but strong evidence to support the claim that there may be an amphitheatre beneath the ground here. The final hint may be more of a conspiracy theory, but incredibly interesting nonetheless. Going back to Chester, Stewart added that the amphitheatre was actually preserved in the precinct of a medieval religious site, St. John's, which was also once a major medieval monastery. And of course here around this area, King's Manor Museum Gardens was once the precinct of the great St. Mary's Abbey. So it is possible, though not yet accepted as truth, that these great medieval sites were built on top of Roman amphitheatres due to Christian martyrdom during the Roman times. Christians were heavily persecuted in the early Roman Empire, and many would have met their tragic end in these amphitheatres. So when these abbeys were founded almost 1,000 years ago, at which time they may have known more than us regarding the amphitheatre, it's possible they built here as a connection to their Christian past. But again, that is not proven. But it's near enough certain there is a Roman amphitheatre beneath York, and it's highly likely that it sits beneath Museum Gardens. So why have we not found it yet? Between June the 1st and June the 4th, 2017, a small group of local archaeologists did undertake a search for the amphitheatre during the Eboracum Roman Festival. Ultimately, nothing was found, but that's hardly surprising. Before the event, Stuart Ainsworth again, who did participate, said a curving wall would be good, but we can't guarantee to find that in the time and space available. The project was, of course, only carried out over 4 days with limited equipment, but there's also the fact that York is incredibly old and has been continually occupied by various peoples. After the Romans were here, the Anglo-Saxons were here, the Vikings were here, the Normans came and destroyed York in the harrying of the north, and then we've got all the history since. Many generations of destroying, but also many generations of building to get through on the way down. In fact, a stone's throw from King's Manor, you can find another hidden part of York that is incredibly fascinating. You can see how the area has risen over centuries and millennia in York. Furthermore, the Museum Gardens and King's Manor grounds were extensively remodelled when the abbey was first built in the 11th century, and then again when the formal gardens were created in the 1830s. With St. Mary's Ruin being a key medieval site, it's greatly restricted excavation, making it one of the few untouched areas of the city of York. So unfortunately, it's not just as simple as digging down. Ultimately, even if the resources were granted to undertake a large-scale mission to find the amphitheatre, legislation would most likely block it. But as Stuart says, what will most likely happen one day is someone working at the King's Manor or at the Yorkshire Museum or in the grounds will be working in a cellar when they accidentally stumble across the answer to York's greatest ever mystery.